You don't set boundaries because you're afraid of what the other person thinks of you. And really, it's because you're afraid that you can't stand in your boundaries. You can't stand firm in yourself. You don't feel safe and secure in yourself enough to actually set them. And it's also not your fault because you were never taught to own what you fucking want. And if you're watching this video, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that most likely, like me, you are naturally on the more agreeable side. The people who are more agreeable, they tend to get flow in seeing what the harmony of things are. They're able to take a back step and they're able to see what the group needs or what people need. And they're able to move towards that together. And that's actually what brings them satisfaction, we can call it. People who are more disagreeable, they get more flow and they get more things out of life when they actually just state what they want and they go after it. Both have a place, neither is better than the other. If you feel like you have a real maliciousness or vindictiveness or hatred towards a disagreeable person, then that's actually something for you to look at for yourself because it's just going to hold you back. Why? Because we have parts within us that are disagreeable and agreeable at the same time. So if we're actually not liking somebody else, it's also just a reflection on how we are treating ourselves. And I don't recommend you to treat yourself in a bad way, but that's just me. When you're dealing with people who are more disagreeable, who are more type A, they're more bullish, they're more extroverted, okay? There's a few things that you can do. But none of it matters if the first point of this video is not addressed. And the first point of this video is feeling safe and secure within yourself. You can't be strong unless you have safety and security in yourself. And I'm going to assume that it's not in all areas of your life that you can't set boundaries, that it's not all areas or scenarios or with all people that you're uncomfortable saying what you want and going after what you want. Most likely it's a few key areas. It's usually around love, it's usually around profession, usually around money, asking for money. And it can normally be around independence, actually. So wanting to go after something that's a little bit different, starting a new hobby, owning what you like rather than what your parents want you to do. I'm thinking of a few clients right now, or what your friends expect of you or what your family expects of you, right? So those are just a few trigger points, acupuncture points. The real answer is that there's so many different topics, but those are the three kind of main areas which I see people struggle with the most. And this is a good thing. It doesn't mean that you're incapable of feeling safe within yourself. It just means you have a few mental hang-ups, you have a few limiting beliefs, you have a few narratives, storylines, identities that is making something which is actually quite straightforward more complex than it is. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to identify, what is this situation? Is there actually a hierarchical or just straight power imbalance? Okay. What I mean by that is that if someone's your boss, maybe you do have to play the politics game. Maybe that's just the game that you signed up for. Or sometimes there is actually an empowerment. There is actually a power imbalance and there is actually a danger there and you have to address that. And funnily enough, it's by addressing that you actually re-own your power for good. Because if we try and change a situation which is not just up to us, which is not just about us, which is not something which just falls to us in terms of responsibility, then that's actually a very disempowering situation. For example, if we have the belief, which is what one of my clients had, or didn't have the belief but had an issue, where he should be able to change the whole corporate finance hierarchical structure to begin with, then that's a very disempowering reality to live in because you think you have the power, but every single day you're confronted with the actual reality of the situation, which is you can't do much. You can speak up, which is what he was very good at. You can be a leader, something that we worked on, and you can be a galvanizing force which stops bosses or hierarchies from mistreating you. But there is actually a power imbalance. And by recognizing that, he was actually able to relieve so much stress, so much tension, and actually do the things that did have an effect or an impact on things in a much more healthy, streamlined way, which didn't burn him out and actually made him feel more powerful. So that's one way. Another way that we can tap into the power and security of ourselves is by seeing what beliefs or narratives do I have about myself that actually suggest the opposite, that say the opposite, that say to myself that I am not powerful, that I'm not this, that I'm not that, okay? And we can do this in a few ways. The best way is to get really curious and also hold compassion for yourself about what are the mental storylines that come up in my life. Thoughts and emotions are going to be a gateway into this, okay? So thoughts are like the literal verbal words that are said, or the images, or whatever it is. Everyone thinks in a different way. That come up that suggest to me that I'm not powerful, that I'm not safe, okay? A lot of the time the reason why we don't set boundaries, the reason why you don't set boundaries is because when you set boundaries, before you set them, you have a negative storyline attached to them. You preempt the negative. What that means is you have a storyline that someone's going to have all of this tension, all of this tightness. They're going to come with loads of resistance, loads of facts. They're going to say, no, 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 all of that kind of stuff. And you're going to have to get into a dogfight. You're going to have to put up with a lot of stuff, and then eventually you're going to crumble. If this is happening, you need to get rid of the negative storyline. You need to project a positive thought instead. There's so many different ways to do that, but how you get to that is by looking at the underlying assumption. Usually the underlying assumption is something along the lines of, this person's bad, this person's going to take advantage of me. This is actually a narrative which one of my clients struggled with, and it was the narrative that this other person knows better than me. So if the other person, even in a mental storyline event, disagreed with my boundaries, it would cause him to be super self-critical, in some ways self-loathing, even though he was already a successful guy, founded his own business, was a medical doctor, all of this kind of stuff. So he had a really high pedigree, but it didn't matter because the underlying assumption is that when another person criticizes me, their opinion has more weight than mine. And it was only by addressing this underlying assumption that he was able to stop this behavior and actually set the boundaries that he wanted. In this case, it was around family. And the third part of this is the strangest, but it's the most important, and it's having an unconditional, loving, compassionate view of yourself. The reason we eject from stressful situations is because we don't have a good self-soothing mechanism. Compassion is the best self-soothing mechanism, and it means when we do state our boundaries, let's say we've gotten to the bottom of our insecurities, we've re-owned power, we've made sure that we know where we are in the world, we are not preempting the negative, we're looking at the underlying assumption and we're just holding it or it's dropping away. And then we do set our boundaries, and that's a really good step. And then the person says no, or the person starts berating us, or the person starts going on their own unconscious babble and rabbit hole and saying, oh, you're always doing this to me, and they put it and they're guilt tripping us, and they're putting emotional pressure onto us and all of that kind of stuff. If we then have a really harsh outlook on ourselves, we downward spiral, we can't take the stress, and we eject and we say, you know what, you're right. And it's back to the same old narrative, the same old storyline, the same old behaviors. But if we instead have a compassionate relationship with ourselves and we say, I know this is stressful, I know this is hard, but no matter what happens, I accept myself, I love myself, and I have compassion for myself, then what happens? We can endure that stress for longer. A lot of the time when somebody is just doing the unconscious babble thing, everyone knows what I'm talking about, when they just push back on you, a lot of the time, as long as they're not being malicious, which is about 80 to 90% of the time, if you just say no and you just hold yourself in a very grounded, warm, loving space, the other person chills out and then they can listen to your point of view. And usually when that happens and you present it in a way which isn't aggressive or blaming or guilt tripping or anything like that, then they're more than likely to come to an agreement. Because remember, just like how you have your boundaries, another person has their boundaries, and sometimes it's incompatible, but most of the time they are compatible. And then what it does is it sorts out the malicious people. It enables you to see with full clarity, oh wait, this person doesn't actually have my best interests at heart. And when you realize that, it leads to the fourth and the bonus point of this entire video, which is you don't have to explain yourself more than you want to. It's not necessary. Your boundaries are yours. The same way that someone else doesn't have to explain their boundaries to you too. Remember, it works two ways. If somebody is always questioning you or is always saying, oh, but what about this? And they're trying to argue out of it, you do not have to engage. That's very, very important. And that's where the compassion comes in too, because they'll try and guilt trip you. They'll try and emotionally attack you. It's not their fault. Most of the time it's not maliciousness. They're just so in their own world and they're so oblivious that they can't help themselves, unfortunately or not. More unfortunate for themselves than it is for you, actually, because it's actually quite tough to live in that world. And also the reason I'm saying that is to add a perspective that is not necessarily talked about so much on these boundary videos, which is to bring in compassion. Because when we don't have a maliciousness to somebody, when we're not attached to how they're feeling, when there's no narrative or storyline that we share with them, we can see things much clearer for what they are. Because much clearer for what they are in this situation would be, oh, this person is very caught up in their own world, and that's okay, but I don't have to explain anything. So I'm just going to say no, right? Whereas if we have all this emotion, we have all this anger, we have all this vindictiveness, and we have this real dislike of the other person, all of these emotions are human, they're fine, okay? We get bought so much into the argument and the fact that we have to state our boundaries and this other person has to understand and they have to get it and all this kind of stuff, when we don't have to engage in that at all. Because when you start stating these boundaries, some people aren't going to like it. Because if we're in a chronic state, or maybe not chronic state, but people aren't used to it, there is a getting used to it period. So we need that compassion, we need that empowerment, we need getting rid of any underlying assumptions about the world that we are wrong or that other people are better and all that kind of stuff. We need all of this in order to ride that wave, because 9 times out of 10, the people who truly love and accept us are going to be fine with it. There might be a bit of friction, but they're going to be fine with it. And when we realize that, then we realize that setting boundaries doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be something that we really need to work on. It's just something that's a natural extension of ourselves. My skin is a boundary to the outside, but I don't think about it. I don't add any pressure. I don't add any friction, you know? I'm not a hypochondriac. I'm not somebody who's obsessed with being clean or being hygienic or any of that stuff, or any of those psychological conditions, right? That's what that would be like in the boundary sense. We don't want to be a hypochondriac around boundaries. We don't want to be someone who needs to be an OCD clean freak around boundaries. No, this is my values. That's how it is. Most of the time, out of compassion, I will want to explain it if the other person is genuinely curious and wants to understand me more. But when it comes from a place of argument or trying to be the big man or trying to impose their will, you don't have to engage in any of that, okay? That's the key distinction there. If you need help getting over the underlying assumptions and the insecurities, I have my free shadow work program. It's the most comprehensive shadow work program I've seen on the market that's out there for free. I give everything. All it costs is your email, and then you get signed up to my email list where I give content which you can't find anywhere else, including on this YouTube channel. I really highly recommend it. So as a recap, we need to feel strong. We can't feel strong unless we have security in ourselves. We can't have security in ourselves unless we fix and heal the underlying insecurities and assumptions we have about the world, ourselves, and the person in front of us. And having unconditional acceptance, compassion, and love makes us extremely strong and anti-fragile, and then we don't have to over-explain ourselves. I'll see you on the next one.